So last class we have discussed about the object-oriented programming system features. As we have discussed, there are three important features when a particular language supports. Then you say it is an object-oriented: encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. Right? Yeah. So then we said, while implementing these features, there are different issues that a particular programming language has to encounter with, and those design issues, how the different languages are dealing with, and then having the proper adequate solutions to fix the same. Also, we have discussed in the previous classes. So some of the design issues that we have discussed in the previous classes: exclusivity of objects, subclasses as types, type checking and polymorphism, single and multiple inheritance, object allocation and deallocation, dynamic and static binding, nested classes. Right, exclusivity of objects. Right, we have said whether the entire thing is considered to be an object, or in addition to objects, other kind of data is also rather allowed. Like for example, in C++, in addition to objects, the functions are also allowed. Right, data is also allowed. But the other languages like Java and Ada or C#, you can see where only the objects and Smalltalk purely object-oriented, rather, right? Completely object-oriented, where you find only the objects, right? So, and then we have discussed, like, the subclasses, how the subclasses relationship get, coordinated with when a parent class is being inherited at the derived class, how the parent class members can be accessed at the derived class. The privileges, of the parent class, how you can rather restrict from accessing by the derived class, and this is all being possible with the help of access specifiers or access modifiers, as they've said, right? And most of the languages, generally use private, public, protected, and their limitations also we have discussed. And the polymorphism. Polymorphism, when you talk about, can be implemented the compile time or runtime, we said, right? The language like C++ provides both compile time and runtime polymorphism. What do you mean by polymorphism? Basically, availability of a function in different forms. It means the same function name, when I call it at different time, the operation of the same is going to be different, rather, right? So that is how the polymorphism, definition. I can rather, I can take one more example to rather, give a clarity on the same. For example, if you have a class like animal available, rather, right? Animal considered to be a parent class or the abstract class, right? So this animal class can be inherited derived classes like man, bird, or snake, or rabbit, and all. And there are certain functions available in the abstract class animal, because animal will have certain properties, and like, let us say, it can move, it can eat, or it can sleep, and all kind of thing. To take one example from the same, like for example, move. Let us say, if you are considering it as a function of the animal, find how this move function is going to be defined by different animals like man, bird, snake, and rabbit, when they are inheriting the animal class. Fine. You can see that a man, when defines the same move method of the animal, he may define with walk or run. Fine. So the operation of the man, you can see with walk or run. Similarly, if you have another animal like bird, who also an animal when inherits the animal class, and defining the move method inside it, then how the bird is going to move. Let us say you have defined that the bird will move by flying. Fine. So fly is the operation, fine, which is being different from the man animal, rather, right? So where man animal moves either through walk or run, or you can see bird also is an animal which is also descended from the animal parent class. But then when you are overriding, or when you are defining the method of move, you are defining it with different kind of characteristic, like it is flying. You're saying it moves by flying rather, right? Similarly, when you have, let us say, snake is also an animal. When you define the method of move for a snake, you say it is going to move by wriggling, right? Similarly, if you have a rabbit class which is also inheriting animal move method, and then when defines it has defined with a characteristic called hopping, right? So you can see move method, which is one of the property of animal. An animal, let us say, it's an abstract class. Why I am saying it is an abstract class? What is abstract class? Abstract classes cannot be instantiated, rather, right? It means they cannot be implemented. It means they are available only in theoretical form. Do you find animal name animal? No. Man kind of animal you find, bat kind of animal you can find, snake or rabbit and all. But animal named animal you don't find, rather, right? It means animal is an abstract class, right? Where you're going to theoretically define the characteristics or properties of how an animal looks like, fine. So such classes are said to be the abstract class. So animal class is an abstract class. So animal type of animal is not available. It means you cannot instantiate animal class, right? And because it is an abstract class, right? Abstract classes cannot be instantiated. But when you see man is a descendant from animal, fine. Man is inheriting the animal class. Then it can access all the methods of the animal and can override these functions which are available in animal. Let us say in animal you have a move function, which is being here defined with a property called walk or run. And when bird is also a kind of animal who is also a descendant of animal, is an animal, right? Is a kind of animal. So it inherits the animal class. When it inherits the animal class, then it can override all such methods which are available in animal class in its own way. Let us say the move method, which is available in animal, has been defined for bird, with flying operation, right? Similarly for snake, wriggling operation. For rabbit, hopping operation, fine. So you can see the operation is differed. This is, but at all these classes, rather, when you are defining the move function, and when you invoke the objects of man class, rather, right? When you create an object of man class and you call the move method, rather, right? You see that the operation is going to be here walk or run. And you can find the same move method when being invoked through bird is going to be fly. When it is being invoked through snake, it is wriggling. When it is being invoked through rabbit, it's going to be hopping. So availability of the same function in different forms is what's said to be the polymorphism. This concept is being implemented in C++ with the help of class casting and the dynamic binding, rather, right? So what happens in class casting, how does class casting is going to be taken care, and how the dynamic binding will take place in C++. Just give you an example here with the same which I have mentioned over here. So if I take animal object pointer, right, this is the base class pointer, then I have objects of man class MOB, and I have bird class object, let us say BOB, and I have snake object SOB, and let us say I have a rabbit object ROB. Okay, so now let us say I am binding this BP, the base class pointer, to MOB, and then invoking the move method, right? Move method BP in direction move, right? And over the same execution, I can rather bind BP to another object BOB, okay? And then I can call the move method, fine. And then I can further bind BP with SOB, that is the kind of object, and then I can invoke the move function. Fine. Over the same execution, I can then again bind the BP with the rabbit object, and then I can invoke the move function. Now let us look at this example. What is happening here is, fine, I have created animal class object. Animal is an abstract class, right? I cannot create object, but I can create object pointers. This is object pointer or reference, right? You can create references or object pointers, of abstract classes, but you cannot create an instance or object, right? Because they cannot be implemented, rather, right? Because abstract classes will have all abstract methods, right? So abstract methods cannot be implemented until they are being overridden in its decedents, rather, right? So I have taken some decedents here: man, bird, snake, and rabbit. And for all such decedents, I have created instances, MOB, BOB, and all kind of thing. So they can be implemented. All these MOB, BOB, SOB, ROB can be implemented. So here you can see I have binded BP with MOB. See, this is called class casting, right? That is, base class pointer can refer to any of its derived class objects, right? But vice versa is not possible. It means derived class pointer cannot point to the base class object, right? So base class pointer I have created, it's not an object, right? This can refer to any of the object memory of its decedent, rather, right? So I have taken first, the man object, and I have binded the man object with BP. Now I see move method, which is available as part of animal, which is when inherited at man, that move is available at man. So you can find there are two moves, right? One is coming from the animal, and then one is overridden with this definition, right? You will find two moves, right? Similarly, here also you find two moves. One is coming from animal, another one is defined in this class with different definitions. Similarly, here as well, two moves, right? So now what happens here is, okay, when you're binding MOB with BP, so for MOB, of course, the memory is going to be created, right? And then BP is just a pointer which can refer to any of its decedent objects. So it is now pointing. Here you can find there are two moves. One is coming from the base class, that is animal. Another is defined by that particular class itself, rather, right? So now when you're trying to invoke this move method through BP, which one of the move has to be rather binded to BP will be in a confusion by the compiler. So compiler cannot able to bind the method to the base pointer at the compile time, rather, right? Because compiler can bind the methods to objects by checking the function prototype. So the prototype is same, right? You have the same function being overridden, right? Overriding is nothing but having the same function prototype, but with a different kind of definition. And this is possible when the functions are in C++ virtual, or in Java if they are abstract, right? Abstract classes in C++, when do you say a class is abstract in C++? When it will have at least one virtual function, right? This move is a virtual function here, right? If you are taking this as a C++ example, then this is a virtual function, right? If you are taking this as a Java example, it is an abstract method, rather, right? So in Java abstract classes, when do you say in an abstract class, a class which will have at least one abstract method is said to be an abstract class, rather, right? So you can take either of the language example. I'm giving this example in a more generic fashion. It can be rather implemented through C++ or Java. Fine. Thinking that there is a move method, either virtual or or abstract, with the same function prototype having been overridden in its decedents, like man, bird, snake, and rabbit. So then if you create an object of man object where you can find this move method is available in two different forms with the same function prototype. So you generally call function prototype as in C++, the same in Java. When you you call it as method signature. Fine. Function prototype or method signature are in ADA, you call it as protocol, rather, right? So function prototype basically consists of function name, arguments in number, order, and type. Similarly, the method signature also, so it consists of the method name, method arguments in number, order, and type rather, right? So here when you can see the function prototype is same, right? But then there are two different definitions of the same move method is available associated with this particular MOV. So now when you are trying to invoke move method through BP is referring to this MOV where there are two moves available. Which one has to be binded rather, to BP will not be clear to compiler. So because generally compiler will bind it with the help of the function prototype. When you see function prototype is same, so it cannot able to distinguish which one has to be rather binded, so it will be left to the system. So operating system when comes into being at the runtime during the execution. So during the execution, operating system will then bind the function which is not abstract or virtual. It knows that virtual functions cannot be implemented or abstract methods also. So it checks going beyond the function prototype, what is abstract method, what is non-abstract method, right? Abstract methods cannot be implemented, whereas concrete methods can be implemented. So it coming to C++, if it is a virtual, then virtual cannot be implemented. So by distinguishing it with the help of this virtual abstract keyword, then it can able to find which one of the method rather can be implemented, or which one is the concrete method, should be rather binded to this BP, it will be binded. So this binding is going to be done at the runtime. This is how I say this binding is said to be the dynamic binding, right? Fine. This binding is said to be the dynamic binding, okay? So class casting and dynamic binding are the two features, additional features of object-oriented programming system, I can say, which will be rather used in order to implement the polymorphism concept here, right? So you can see here when you are, when this particular instruction is being executed, here the move which is non-abstract or non-virtual is rather being binded, and then the result out of it you are going to get either walk or run, okay? Because it is a man object move method definition rather being called. So then what happens again when it goes to the next instruction? So in the next instruction you can see this BP is now being binded with BOB. So when you create an object of BOB, which is an object of bird class, then for BOB also memory been allocated, and BP, as I said, which is a base pointer of the abstract class, the animal class, which can rather bind to any of its dissident objects. So if it has been binded to man object, which is also a dissident, and it can rather bind to bird object as well, because bird is also a dissident of the animal. So now BP is going to get binded with BOB when this instruction comes into being rather, right? So it means BP is no more pointing here, BP is pointing here. But again in BOB you can find there are two move methods. One is coming from parent class, that is animal, which is abstract or virtual, and then there is another move which is being defined in the bird class, right? With the definition to implement the move by flying rather, right? So now what happens here, again when you call the move method with the help of BP, which one rather has to get binded is not being done by the compiler, since compiler could not able to distinguish it, and then it will be left to the operating system. So it is also being done during the execution. So at the runtime, operating system is going to bind the concrete method to the BP. Then the output that you're going to get here is nothing but flying, because the definition of move which is being here rather implemented is coming from the bird class, because the time when this move was being called through BP was pointing to BOB, which is an object of bird. So similarly again BP can rather get binded to the snake object, and then it can eventually call the move method of the snake object. Then probably you may see the result of here move method is going to be wriggling rather, right? Wriggling, right? And again after a while it can rather then get binded to the rabbit object, ROB, right? When this particular statement get executed, it means BP will no more point to here, it will point to the on the rabbit object. And then similarly you will have two move methods available in even ROB as well. One is coming from the animal, one is defined by itself, right? So where the definition of move event through hopping. So now when move method is being invoked through BP, what happens? Hopping is the operation. You are going to see that of move of rabbit rather, right? So then you can see if you probably observe this particular skeleton of the code, the same move method you are calling how many times here? 4 times, and through the same object pointer BP, right? You can see, but the result is different here. When you say move, it is that movement is happening through walk or run. Here it is happening through flying. Here it is happening through wriggling. Here it is happening through hopping. It means here you can see the operation of the move is being different over the same execution at different instances of time. This is what is said to be the polymorphism, right? Polymorphism. But I'm saying this as a runtime polymorphism because this is all going to be done during the runtime, right? This is all going to be done during the runtime because the binding of these functions all are being done at the runtime, and the object pointer, that is the base class object pointer, is being binded to different objects of its decedent during the runtime and in invoking the move method of the same rather, right? So this is all being done during the runtime. So I can say it is a runtime polymorphism, and this is all happening through class casting. Class casting is the concept which is being available, which is being available in C++. So what class casting will allow you to have is the base class pointers. The base class pointer can refer to any of its decedent object memory. That's how I have done it rather, right? So in this particular example, you can rather implement it through C++ or Java. Doesn't matter when you are implementing it through C++, right? You say the move method will be the virtual function and your animal class is an abstract class. But if you're implementing it through Java, animal class is an abstract class and your move method is an abstract method, right? And that move abstract methods can be overridden here with the different definition at its decedents, right? So here, there are certain conclusions we can draw out of this particular example that the abstract methods, right, can be overridden, you can see, right, but cannot be implemented, and abstract classes can be inherited but cannot be instantiated. Fine. So these are some of the conclusions we can draw out of it, and how they are being implemented through different programming languages. I have taken 2 examples and then I have explained you the same. Fine. Yeah, coming to inheritance, right? Single level, multi-level, multiple, and hierarchical hybrid inheritances are available. All are being here supported by C++, but there are certain languages who will not support all. Like for example, Java. Java does not support multiple inheritance directly, but with the help of interfaces, it can rather support the same. Fine. So these are some of the design issues that we have discussed before as well. I'm just taking a glance at the same. Allocation and deallocation of the objects, how it's going to be done. If you can see in C++, you have both implicit and explicit option, right? You have both implicit and explicit option in C++, right? But in Java, you have only explicit option, right? So how do you basically create objects explicitly with the help of new, right? With the help of new operator rather, right? So, and if you see in C++, you have a concept called destructors and constructors, of course. So these destructors will take care of deallocating the memory, right? So deallocation is going to be taken care by the destructors, and the destructors are going to be implicitly called by the system whenever an object scope is going out. So you have a delete operator available in C++, which will deallocate the memory occupied by the object whenever the object scope is going out. Deallocating is nothing but releasing the memory, right? Releasing the memory of that object into the heap. Whenever the object scope is out, it is not accessible rather, right? it is not accessible. When it is not accessible, why the memory associated with that particular object to be retained? It is better if you can release that memory so that that memory can be utilized by someone else rather, right? So that's how the effective utilization of memory can be done by having the destructors. In Java, if you see, you have Gigo object, garbage in, garbage out, as part of memory management. So it will take care of automatically deallocating the memory occupied by the object whenever the object scope is going out. So the deallocation is going to be done in Java implicitly, right? So this deallocation is going to be done implicitly in Java, whereas in C++ deallocation is to be done explicitly, right? You have to have one constructor, and the constructor will have the deallocation of the members of the particular object with the help of delete rather, right? So, but when it comes to the construction, as I said, new operator is being used to create the memory required for the particular object explicitly. I'm taking these two examples because these are the two languages which you are rather familiar with. But then after this issues I discuss, I then probably will see with all different programming language perspectives how these design issues are being fixed, right? And how they have been rather taken care by the different programming languages. I hope this is clear. Yeah, as you said, static binding and dynamic binding. The dynamic binding is allowed in C++ and Java and many of the object-oriented programming languages for objects, and as well static binding is allowed. Like in C++, both static and dynamic binding is allowed, but whereas in Java only dynamic binding you have rather, right? So it's going to vary from language to language whether they allow both or one or two out of it rather, right? Coming to nested classes, so class within a class you can rather have like in C++ this is being possible. Now coming to different programming language, and I will see how these object-oriented programming system concepts have been implemented across the different programming languages, and there is an issue that we have discussed that you come across with when you are implementing the object-oriented programming system have been dealt with in the different programming languages. So starting with Smalltalk is one of the pure object-oriented programming language and one of the first object-oriented programming language, whether it is before C++. Of course, C++ got popularity because of C. Popularity was at peak at the time at which the C++ was invented. So that's how the C++ has become more popular. But Smalltalk is before C++. Of course, right? Smalltalk is a pure object-oriented programming language, I can say, because it consists of everything in terms of objects, right? You don't find any other data other than the object, and all objects have local memories. All computations is through the objects sending messages to objects. So how the communication is going to happen between the objects is via the messages. None of the appearances of imperative languages you find. C initially you can say it's an imperative programming language only. As I've told you in the initial classes when we have classified the programming paradigm, imperative programming language is one of the programming taxonomy where you can find, because the first computer architecture which is being designed by the von Neumann has allowed only the imperative languages at the initial time, and then over the time then structural, procedural, you can find object-oriented, concurrent all came into being. Fine. So you can find none of the appearances of imperative in this Smalltalk. It's a completely object-oriented kind. All objects are allocated from the heap, and deallocation is implicit. Like how in Java the deallocation is implicit, here also in Smalltalk deallocation is implicit, and the objects are allocated from the heap. It means runtime. Runtime, the memory going to be allocated, right? And the allocation of memory going to be done during the runtime, like how in Java it happens. Fine. Okay, so now Type checking and polymorphism, if you see the design issue of type checking and polymorphism in Smalltalk, all binding of messages to methods is dynamic. The process is to search the object to which the message is sent for the method. If not found, search the superclass, etc., up to the system class which has no superclass. Fine. When you passing the message, I mean, the communication between the objects is going to be done through the messages, and when the how the object is going to be searched is by if it cannot find immediately, it will search for its immediate superclass, and likewise it goes until it finds the superclass to find that respective object with which the communication rather has to happen for another object, right? The only type checking in Smalltalk is dynamic, and the only type error occurs when a message is sent to an object that has no matching method. When there is no matching method available, rather, right? So that error is going to happen, and it's all going to be done at the runtime. Okay, so you may have result it as an exception. Inheritance. Coming to inheritance, a Smalltalk subclass inherits all of the instance variables, instance methods, and class methods of its superclass. So when you inherit the base class in Smalltalk, all the methods, variables, and its superclass methods also being made available at the dissident class, the subclass, right? All subclasses are subtypes. Nothing can be hidden. All inheritances is implementation. Inheritance only. There is no multiple inheritance available in Smalltalk, similar to Java. But then, of course, multiple inheritance in Java being made possible by simulating it with the help of interfaces, right? Evaluation of Smalltalk. The syntax of the language is simple and regular. Good examples of power provided by small languages. Slow compared with conventional compiled imperative languages. It is slow, little, compared to when with imperative languages. Dynamic binding allows type errors to go undetected until runtime. You have everything being binded during the runtime itself because the objects are being created at the runtime, and the delocation is also being done implicitly during the runtime and all, right? So if there are certain errors because of type, right, is going to happen when it's not able to properly detect the same. Greatest impact of the same, it has encompasses to invent or to lead with a new or advancements of OOPS, you can say, right? What are the different object-oriented programming system features that you can find are supported in C++, supported by C++, and how C++ is taking care of the same? I have explained most of the design issues when I was discussing by taking the C++ and Java example. So you can just recall the same, just go through the slides and all. Right? General characteristics of the C++, it is evolved from Simula 67. Simula 67 was one of the object-oriented programming system invented in 67, and that was the basis for C++. Most widely used object-oriented programming system you can see in the language community. It's a mixed type system. It will have both static and dynamic type constructors and destructors. It will have, right, and it elaborates the access controls to class entities. Coming to inheritance, it supports all type of inheritances, and it restricts the privileges of the superclasses, with the help of the access controls or access modifiers such as private, public, protected, and all. Fine. So the private members are visible only when only within the class, and it disallows the subclasses from being subtypes. It means when subclasses are instantiated, or it has been inherited at some other class, there the private members cannot be rather accessed. But public, if the members are declared with the help of public access control, then they can be visible within the class and through the object as well, or in its dissident as well, right? And protected if you declare the members of the class and the same when inherited the different dissidents or the subclasses. These protected members can be accessible, including the accessibility of the same within the class, right? But not through the object, right? But not through the clients in the sense the object rather, right? In addition, the subclassing process can be declared with access controls. And I mean, you can basically, I'll in the next class, next slide, I'm going to show you an example of the inheritance, how the subclassing process can also be rather controlled with the help of this access control. We say they are the visibility mode in C++. Fine. Which defines the potential changes in access by subclasses, right? So access specifiers and access visibility mode both will help you in restricting the privileges of the superclasses at different levels for different users, right? So we can have when probably we are deriving the super classes and the subclasses, you can derive it privately, protectedly, or publicly, right? So using the different visibility mode, the visibility mode also here been classified, we classified into 3 types: private, protected, and public, right? So I will see with an example here. I hope the example is legible to all of you. So let us look at the base class. You have a base class here. So in this base class, you can see there are different members of the same declared under different access specifiers. This is private access specifier. These are said to be access specifiers, right? These members like B and Y has been declared under protected mode, and C and Z has been declared under public mode, right? So now you can see the subclass 1 is inheriting the base class. How do you inherit the base class? By using colon. Colon is the operator here being used in order to inherit a base class. So how do you write class? The derived class name of the child class, the subclass you call it as, right? These are all the different terminology which are intermittently being used. Fine. Followed by a colon, then followed by the class. Before class, you have something else. You can see you have set public. This is said to be the access control or access modifier, or I say it is visibility mode, right? In C++. Fine. Access control. So we have there are 3 type of access control, very similar to that of access specifier, like private will protected. So when I have public as an access control, it means I am accessing or I am inheriting the base class publicly, right? I am inheriting this class publicly. When I inherit the base class publicly, what all the members that you have in the base class, they will be accessible within the derived class with the same scope, with the same access limitation. It means A and X was declared under private mode, so A and X I can directly access as a private member here in the subclass, like how the base class can access, right? And this B and Y has been declared under protect mode under the base class. So the B and Y I can access in this subclass with the same protected scope, and C and Z I can access in subclass with the same public scope. So when I inherit the base class publicly, the scope of the members which is being declared in the base class or the super class is as it is available in my subclass, right? But when I inherit the base class at a subclass privately, this is private derivation, this is public derivation, right? This is public derivation, this is private derivation. So if you see in private derivation, what happens? Private of private cannot be accessed. It means A and X I cannot access. I cannot access A and X here in subclass 2, right? But protected members here, protected members also being restricted to functions, functions of the subclass rather, right? So you can see in this one, B, Y, C, and Z are private. Okay, B, Y, C, and Z. They all being made available, but they will be made available as private. But you can see these A and X are not accessible, right? So it means that this B, Y, C, and Z, protected of private becomes here private, and public of private also becomes here private. So it means B, Y, C, Z, they can be accessible, but with the private scope. It means within the same class, if you have some functions, then in that functions you can access this. But if this class is further inherited, there you cannot access this. Okay, until it is publicly inherited, fine. Or they cannot be accessed through the object also, right? So if you can see the chart, I'll just give you the chart here. Access specifiers, and you have access modifiers or visibility mode, I say, right? This is said to be visibility mode, right? This is said to be access specifier. So now for base classes and the super classes, base class and you have derived class. Say base class members, if they are private and visibility mode, that is publicly inherited, let us say, publicly inherited, then the derived class scope, I'm just writing the scope of derived class here. Scope of derived class, private or public becomes private, okay? And let us say if you have public members and you have inherited publicly, then it becomes public only, right? As it is, when you are inheriting publicly, right? Private becomes private, public becomes public, protected become protected, right? Protected become protected in derived classes. Scope of the members in derived classes. In derived classes, right? And let us say if you are trying to inherit privately, okay, then private members cannot be accessible, right? And the public members, when you are inheriting privately, I'm talking, right? Visibility mode is private. Public members become private here. And protected also become private here. Okay. So this is how the scope of the, scope of the members, made available in the derived class of the base class, right? When you have derived the base class publicly, right? When you have derived the class publicly, private becomes private in the derived class, public become public, protected become protected, as it is, right? Right. So when you have this base class inherited publicly, what happens? This private AX, become available here, and as private only, BY is also available here, and CZ is also available here, rather, right? So as it is, when AX is available as private, BY is available as protected, and CZ is available as. But then, when you are trying to inherit the base class privately, like here in this case, private cannot be accessible. It means AX cannot be accessible here. Public becomes private. This public becomes CZ becomes private, and protect also become private. It means BY also becomes private here, right? These are the scope rules here when you are implementing the inheritance, which is being suggested in C++. Okay. I hope this is clear to all of you. One motivation of for using private derivation, why do you basically inherit privately, is to keep the data being private from the dissidents and subsequently the clients and all, right? A class provides members that must be visible, so they can be defined to be the public member. A derived class adds some new members probably, and but does not want its clients to see the members of the private class, even though they had to be public in the class definition, right? So generally what happens, even the derived class doesn't want his clients to see the private data. So, though the data which was declared public inside the superclass, he make it private in order to hide it from the users. The reason why private derivation most of the derived classes make use of. If you do not use the accessibility visibility mode, that is public or private, if you do not mention here, then by default it is private. If I don't write public here, if I just specify after colon the class name, then by default it becomes private, okay? But if I have to inherit public, then I have to explicitly mention public. Similarly, in access specifiers also default is private. So if I do not mention the access specifier here and I declare the members, it by default be declared under the private mode itself. But if I have to declare under protect and public, I need to explicitly mention the same. Okay. Multiple inheritance is supported in C++, right? You can inherit more than one class, at the same class, right? Like for example, you have one base class here, base 1. And you have another base class, let us say base 2. Now at a derived class, you want both the classes to be inherited. Give colon and then you give the visibility mode. If you do not give the visibility mode, by default it is going to be private rather, right? So I just mentioned the class name base 1 comma base 2. Okay, then I must be having the code required for this derived class. Then what happens here? Base 1 and base 2, both the classes are going to be inherited. It means the members of base 1 and base 2 both are available at the derived class, and derived can have its own members as well, right? This is said to be multiple inheritance. This is how in C++ multiple inheritance is being implemented, by separating the classes, base classes, at the time of derivation, right? You can have any number of classes to be derived at a particular derived class by separating it with a comma operator, right? So, but if you want certain classes to be inherited publicly, certain to be private, then you have to mention the visibility mode explicitly. If I mention public before base 1, then this will be inherited publicly. If I do not mention the visibility mode before base 2, then this will be inherited privately, because default is private, right? Binding, as I have explained you in before example while I was discussing the runtime polymorphism, that dynamic binding is another additional feature which is being supported by C++, which helps in implementing, of course, the runtime polymorphism. So, and how it is going to be done, I have explained you with an example before itself, with the help of virtual functions, right? Generally, your base class, in your base class, you will have the virtual functions which cannot be implemented but can be overridden. So in the derived classes, you will be inheriting them, right? You will be overriding with some different kind of definition, right? And similarly, you can have in different dissidents of the base class, different definition of the same, or you can have a single derived class also. No issue. I have taken an example of hierarchical inheritance. The example which I have explained you to show you the runtime polymorphism is the hierarchical inheritance, right? When a base class is inherited at different derived classes, like animal class which I have explained you, man, bird, right? And you have rabbit and all, right? The example which I have before explained you. This is said to be the hierarchical inheritance, right? A root is inherited at different child classes, and this can be further inherited at its derived classes. This can go like that, okay? This is said to be hierarchical is also one type of inheritance which is being implemented in supported by C++, right? Is a combination of single and multi-level, you can say, right? If you are inheriting the base class at one level, then I say it is a single level, right? But then if you are inheriting at another level, right? man 1 2 man 1 1 and man 1 2. If you have, this is another level, so then it is said to be multi-level, right? So single level, you can have multi-level, and this is said to be the hierarchical, right? This is said to be hierarchical. And another one is multiple, that is if you have two different base classes to be inherited at one single derived class, right? This is said to be multiple. Or you can have combination of these inheritances, which is said to be hybrid inheritance, right? So all these type of inheritances are going to be supported by C++. Single level, multi-level, multiple, and hierarchical, then hybrid. Hybrid is nothing but the combination of any more than one. It means single level, multi-level. If I have both of them in the single type of inheritance, this is a hybrid. And if I have another, let us say, base class B0, this is inherited here, fine. So this is a multi-level, this is a single, and this is a multiple. So combination of three: single, multi-level, multiple. So then combination of more than one, I say it is a hybrid kind of inheritance. So all these type of inheritances are going to be supported by C++ rather, right? So dynamic binding, I have given you with an example. Basically it will help you out in implementing the runtime polymorphism, as said, right? So base class, when the class is an abstract class, when do you say the class is an abstract class in C++? When it will have a minimum of one virtual function, right? Okay, how do you define a virtual function? With the help of virtual keyword. You will have virtual prefixed to the function prototype. If you have some method like display kind of thing. Okay, so like let us say this is a display method. So generally you will write the return type, function name, and argument. But in addition to that, you can see virtual is prefixed to the function prototype, right? So then this becomes virtual. So if you do not have any code inside that, then we say it is a pure virtual function. Pure virtual function is a virtual function which does not have the body. It means no source code at all. You can define pure virtual function, like this also. Display equal to 0. You can define like this, or you can define like this: virtual void display. I can have open parenthesis, close parenthesis immediately, right? I don't have any code. If I do not have any code inside the virtual function, then I say it is a pure virtual function. A class that has at least one pure virtual function, I say it is an abstract class, right? So these are all some of the concepts of C++, which helps you in implementing the different object-oriented programming system features that we have seen before. I hope this is clear to all of you. Evaluation. C++ provides extensive access controls, unlike Smalltalk. You have private, protected, and public and all. C++ provide multiple inheritance, like Smalltalk or in other Java and all. They don't support directly multiple inheritance. In C++, the programmer must decide at design time which methods will be statically bound and which must be dynamically bound. Static binding is faster, right? If you have functions with virtual keyword, they will be binded during the runtime, right? So if you know that these functions have to be binded during the runtime, then you you declare that method with the help of virtual keyword, right? But otherwise, you go with the static binding. Static binding is faster, so you always go with static binding. Fine. Smalltalk type checking, if you see, it is all dynamic because the objects are created during runtime, and binding of the methods with the object is also being done during the runtime. Okay, of course it is flexible but somewhat unsafe, you can say, rather, right? But why you say it is unsafe? If some of the objects it could not able to find for the messages that are required to be passed and then invoke their respective methods until it reaches the superclass, then it results in exception or an error, rather, right? Because of interpretation and dynamic binding, Smalltalk is 10 times slower than the C++, right? Because of course Smalltalk is interpretation based, whereas C++ is C++ is compile based. As we have discussed in the initial classes, the interpretation based is little slower compared to the compile based, of course, right? Why? The reason is compile based is going to send the entire code once for the execution, whereas interpretation based is going to send the code line by line after having been checked during the runtime as well. So since it is going to check during the runtime again and then forward that particular sentence, the system has to wait until it gets the next statement to be rather execute. That's how it becomes slower. Support for OOPS in Java, okay, because of its close relationship to C++, focuses on the differences from that languages. Most of the C++ syntax you can directly port it to the Java, and without having any modifications, right? Whether you take control statement concept, whether you take data type concept, whether you take the object-oriented programming system concepts, all that you can directly take onto Java, but only certain differences that you find in Java we will probably discuss here, right? As you know rightly that virtual functions instead of virtual, you have abstract keyword here in Java. So an abstract class will have at least one abstract method, and similarly Java is interpreter based, whereas C++ is compile based, and all the object-oriented features like encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism are being implemented in Java as well. You can see in Java you will have only the classes and objects, right? Whereas in C++ you find in addition to classes and objects, functions as well, rather, right? And if you see, multiple inheritance in C++ is available explicitly, but whereas the same in Java is being simulated through, what do you call, interfaces, fine. And coming to some more programming constructs, where if you can probably want to differ or differentiate the C++ in Java, you do not have pointers in Java, but the simulation of the same is available with the help of reference kind, right? Reference objects are available in Java. So when the example which I have explained you for runtime polymorphism, which you can rather when implement in Java, you will be using the reference object instead of the pointers, right? So and then further we'll see some more differences here by listing out the same. Just to go through the PPT, getting a glance at this. All data are objects here except the primitive types. You can see the data types that you have in Java. Even the data types are high performance objects, we can say. We have integer family, we have character family, we have boolean family, we have float family. So integer family consists of byte, short, long, and int, right? Whereas boolean family is consists of boolean, which will have true false values, and then you have a float family consists of float and double, and you have character family, fine. So character takes 16 bits instead of 8 bits like how C++ will have, because Java is being meant for universal kind. So 1 byte out of this 2 bytes for character being used for ASCII, and another byte is basically being used to represent the language, because Java can be used for all different kind of languages. It's a universal kind, so you can implement it with the help of Greek language, Japanese, or Telugu, Urdu, or Hindi, or any other kind. So the another byte which you have in addition to the ASCII byte being used to represent the language, rather, right? And these built-in data types, are also high performance, because here in Java, what happened, in order to make the Java to be completely object-oriented, the data types have been made as a high-performance object by increasing their performance, rather, right? All primitive types have wrapper classes that store one data value. All objects are heap dynamic, are referenced through reference variables, and most are allocated through new, right? So how the objects are going to be created in Java with the help of new operator, right? Explicitly, all objects are created during the runtime only. Okay, all objects are created during runtime, and how they are going to be created with the help of new. If you have student object, then you say student SOB equal to new student, right? This is how you create an object, right? You have constructors also available in Java. Fine. You have default constructors and a parameterized constructor, but you do not have copy constructor, right? So when you have multiple constructors in the same class, we say it is a constructor overloading. Constructor overloading concept is also available, like how C++ is providing you, right? So constructor overloading is also exhibiting what? Polymorphism, because when you're creating different objects of the same class, you find different initializations for these different objects. So it's being happened because the different constructors are being invoked for the different objects when they are being instantiated, rather, right? So it's also said to be a kind of polymorphism. Fine. Okay. All objects are heap dynamic. It means the memory is going to be allocated for objects through heap itself, right? Dynamically. And whenever the object scope is going out, automatically the memory is going to be released into the heap back, right? And that is going to be taken care by the GIGO as part of the memory management of Java, right? A finalized method is simply implicitly called when the garbage collector is about to reclaim the storage. So who is going to do this? The finalized object. You have, there's a method called finalize associated with each object, which is going to be invoked implicitly by the garbage collector, that is GIGO, whenever the object scope is going out, so that that memory which has been occupied by the object is going to be released into the heap, so that it can be utilized for some other purpose. So effective memory utilization is going to be done because of having these kind of features, rather, right? I hope this is clear to all of you. Inheritance. Coming to inheritance in Java, single inheritance you have supported directly, but there is an abstract class category that provides some of the benefits of the multiple inheritance with the help of interfaces, right? So interface is a keyword with the help of which you can have the interfaces very similar to a class, right? But then interface will have all the abstract methods. It will have all the abstract methods, right? So these abstract methods are going to be overridden or defined in the derived classes, right? So when you are in, let us say, for example, if you have student interface and you have a marks class here, then this marks class can implement this. So what do you say? Implements here, right? Implements student. When you say this, what happens? You will be overriding all the methods which are defined inside the interface here, because they're all abstract methods, right? So the abstract methods cannot be implemented unless they are defined or overridden. So they are going to be overridden in its derived classes, right? So how this multiple inheritance is going to be implemented here in Java? If you see, I have, let us say, one base class, base 1, okay, and then I'm having another base class, but with the help of interface I'm defining, right? Base 2 is an interface here. Now at a derived class, I want both these base classes to be inherited. How do I do that? If I am extending or inheriting a class, I say extends, right? Extends is the keywords being used to inherit the class. I say extends base 1, comma, implements, right? If I am inheriting the interface, then I say implements keyword, right? Implements base 2. I can have any number of implementations. It means one base class extension I can have, but multiple interfaces I can implement. That's how it is going to allow you to have the multiple inheritance with the help of interfaces, right? So base class, when you extend base 1, one class can be extended directly because single inheritance is allowed. So this is said to be single inheritance. But then in order to support the multiple inheritance with the help of interfaces, we do the same. So if I have interfaces defined of the base classes, they can be rather here implemented with the help of implements keyword. So all such abstract methods which are declared inside those interfaces, they will be overridden here with a new definition, and they can be rather invoked with the help of this particular object, and they can be implemented, right? So this is how you can perform the multiple inheritance in Java. Okay. I hope this is clear to all of you.
Yes, sir.
There are certain keywords we have in Java, like abstract, final. So if I am using final, the methods which are abstract, as I told you, that they can be overridden, right? And then they can be implemented further. But if you have final classes, okay, they cannot be overridden, okay? And the difference between the abstract and final classes, abstract classes can be inherited and cannot be instantiated, whereas final classes cannot be inherited but can be instantiated. Okay, so this is the difference between the final and the abstract keywords when they are being implemented with when they are being used with the help of functions and classes. Okay, I hope this is clear. So when I'm using abstract and final keywords along with the methods and the classes, what is the characteristic or the performance of them? Final methods cannot be overridden but can be implemented. Okay, abstract methods can be overridden but cannot be implemented. Final, when it comes to classes, final classes can be instantiated but cannot be inherited. Coming to abstract classes can be inherited but cannot be instantiated, right? Okay, so now coming to dynamic binding, a dynamic binding can be implemented, of course, as I have given you an example before. That example, you can probably illustrate for this particular example as well. So basically in Java, all the messages are dynamically bound to the methods because the objects are going to be created during the runtime. Obviously, the methods that are required to invoke the particular object are also going to be rather binded during the runtime. Okay. So final methods cannot be overridden. Therefore, dynamic binding serves no purpose here, right? Static binding is also used if the method is static or private, both of which disallow the overriding. Several varieties of nested classes you can have in Java. All can be hidden from the classes in their packages except for the nesting classes. You may have seen the dot kind of operator being used in Java, right? IO dot, you will have Java dot IO dot, you will have iStream class, right? And dot the method. The Java is a package in which you have sub packages, and then you will have further sub packages or classes. Then you can have subclasses of the same. Then you can have further the methods which are associated with it, right? So this particular dot operator can be used to access. It means you can have nested option available in Java in variety of ways. It means you can have class within a class and classes within a package within a package kind of thing. Okay, so these all different variations are available with you in Java. All can be hidden from the all classes in their package except for the nesting classes. Okay, nesting classes can be anonymous. Anonymous in the sense the class without name. Okay, so you can have anonymous classes as well. Only at the time of implementation you can just define the definition and then implement it, right? At the parameter level also you can do that. You have some method, and you're calling the method for a particular object, and in the parameter list you can define the class. Okay, you can define anonymous class with the adequate methods which are required to be implemented, and then further has to be sent as a value to the formal parameter, right? Okay, that also is possible in the Java, right? Anonymous classes. So you find static and non-static classes in Java. Static classes are the one when you call through different objects of the same are going to be invoked from the same memory. It means all the objects of the same class will share the same memory. It means any number of, despite any number of the objects you create for an object for a static class, only one instance will be created, and the same is going to be shared by all the objects of the same. That is the reason why in Java static classes can be accessed through the class name itself, instead of creating an object of the same and then invoking their methods, right? So this is all different kind of possibilities you have available with the Java. I hope this is clear to all of you. Now coming to evaluation, design decisions to support OOPS are similar to C++. No support for procedural programming, no parentless classes you find. Dynamic binding is used as normal way to bind methods calls to the method definition, uses interfaces to provide simple form of support for multiple inheritance. Okay, I'll stop here. It's 12:20.